This is a public service announcement. If you have Victorian morals and you're a little taken aback by foul language, my talk is 15 minutes. So you might want to step out of the room for a bit. Just over 3 months ago, February 28, 2011, my life went a little bit crazy. On that day, it was revealed that I spent the previous 6 months writing a lengthy, anonymous, incredibly profane, sweetly surreal, satirical real-time novel about an Elseworld Rahm Emanuel and his struggle to save the multiverse from the cruel hands of space-time itself. It followed him on the campaign trail for the Chicago mayoral election, and it did things like this. Did strategy sessions on slogans, went to cultural events around the city, gave speeches about economic development at places like the Threadless T-shirt company, had to escape from being trapped in the sewers below City Hall, riding a door of former Mayor Jane Byrne's sex dungeon into the Lake Calumet. And finally, near the end, in a hallucination fueled by eating fermented baby food, ended up dancing with the ghost of soul legend Curtis Mayfield, who revealed deep secrets of Chicago to him. Each of these individual tweets, are about 1,954 of them, combined together to actually tell an entire 400,000 or 40,000 word story. And I did all of this on Twitter in real time, mostly tapped out letter by letter on my phone as I commuted to and from work. So I want to take my time today to talk a little bit more about that, but also about how the Mayor Emanuel story reflects the reality of controlling communication today. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about a choice that I was given that day, February 28, 2011, on my front stoop by these guys. This is the first of several local TV news people that showed up at my front door. These are from the ABC News affiliate. But first, perhaps I should back up. This is Wired Magazine writing about the Mayor Emanuel account. And you don't start something like this saying, I want to make a genuine cultural event, because you won't. You start it the way you start most art, which is trying to make a few friends entertained. That was the first night sitting on the couch with a beer by myself. That was really the entire intention. By the end of that first night, close to 500 people were following the account. And by the end of the first day, there were over 1,000. And that number just kept growing and growing and growing. And as time went on, the account started to do some surprising things. It started slowly to tell a story, one that diverged significantly from the kind of profane day-to-day observation on the news that it began in the way most parody accounts continue. It began to develop characters. In addition to Rahm Emanuel, obviously, he was joined from the real world by David Axelrod, who in my story was not just a trusted advisor, but also kind of his best friend. And he was also joined by fictional characters, an intern named Carl, a puppy named Hambone, and a duck with a mustache that he named Quaxelrod. Over the months, those characters grew and the stories became more fantastical until the end, which was set up by a clandestine meeting on the roof of Chicago City Hall with then Mayor Daley, who revealed that the job of the mayor of Chicago was not simply to run the city that we know, but also to overlook a time portal of infinite Chicagos. And that there were 2 Rahm Emanuels living in our world, and only one of them would survive the election. And that story eventually ended with Mayor Emanuel dissolving into time itself. This is his final words, cut off mid-sentence as the time vortex closed around him. This was an act that was actually witnessed by over 40,000 followers at the time. And a different story was actually being written in the real world of this account. Dozens of news stories began to emerge. The election was February 22nd, starting in kind of December and leading in. They began to build on each other, writing about the account, about the implications of it, a lot of questions about who was writing it, And then something kind of like the story of Mayor Emanuel itself, very unexpected happened.
I have to ask you really, really fast here about this, Rahm. You know, you've got a lot of followers on Twitter, including myself, but, you know, that guy that's out there as the fake Rahm Emanuel has 21,000 Twitters. What do you think about that guy?
Here's what I'm going to do. After the election, I am offering a donation to the charity of that gentleman or woman's choice if they would come forward and identify themselves.
Oh, that's a good plan. That is a good plan.
I am, after the election, I think this is like the individual, you know, finally Joe Klein came out and said he wrote the book, The Natural.
Right.
Identify.
Primary colors.
Who wrote on president. I will offer $2,500 or $5,000 personal contribution to the charity of that individual's choice if they would make public who they are.
Hey, you just made some news right there. And I got to tell you, do you ever laugh? Do you ever read that?
And in fact, I don't listen to the Rowan Roper show. I hadn't known it happened until the @replies to Mayor Emanuel exploded with people commenting on it, most of them saying it's a trap. Right? I did actually take him up on his offer, and in fact, Causes.com matched his offer, and the two radio hosts matched that offer, and they raised additional money. So somehow, through some bizarre confluence of events, over $13,000 was raised for the Young Chicago Authors Writing Program in Chicago. But that happened a few weeks after the fact, after this. What this happened, you heard him, he said a charitable contribution, right? Within moments, the web exploded with Rahm Emanuel puts bounty on vulgar Twitter writer's head. And that, in addition to the fact that the election was closing, it was probably coming to a close in a week, made me realize that this really needed to come to an end. And so it was that a week after Election Day, my identity as the author of Mayor Emanuel was revealed on the Atlantic Monthly's website by Alexis Madrigal. He did a wonderful job of framing the impact of what I'd done within the context of storytelling, saying, quote, "It pushed the boundaries of the medium, making Twitter feel less like a humble platform for updating your status and more like a place where literature could happen. Never deviating too far from the reality of the race itself, Mayor Emanuel wove deep, hilarious stories. It was next-level digital political satire and caricature, but over the months the account ran, it became much more. By the end, the stream resembled an epic, elusive ode to the city of Chicago itself, yearning and lyrical." The story even quoted Russian literature. It was a really good story. Anyway, that piece broke at 1:15 on the 28th of February, and at 3 o'clock, these guys were at my front door. Just an hour and 45 minutes after the news broke, the real-time web had delivered newsmen onto my front stoop. With each passing news event, whether it's something as ultimately inconsequential as Mayor Emanuel, or things of huge consequence like the killing of Osama bin Laden, or the uprisings throughout the Middle East we heard so much about this morning, with each of these news events, it becomes more and more clear that the real-time dissemination and distribution of information at web scale is something truly remarkable and something quite complicated. As word of Osama bin Laden's death spread through Twitter, the network found itself with traffic numbers it had rarely seen before. At their peak, the servers were processing over 5,000 tweets a second. To put that in perspective, a hummingbird's wings beat about 20 to 25 times a second. That means that at the height of that graph, Twitter was moving 250 times faster than a hummingbird's wings. The only time, or one of the few times that this is actually, that Twitter's beat faster than that was actually 4 seconds after midnight on January 1st of this year in Japan, when it recorded a staggering 6,900 tweets a second, all of Japanese folks wishing each other a Happy New Year. We live at a time when sources, when eyewitnesses, when information can spread on its own. When each piece of information builds on the other, being retweeted and redistributed out of the control of any single entity. We live at a time when anyone can create an image, send a message, or tell a story that has the possibility of reaching an audience without the mediation of traditional power brokers. In fact, we live at a time where control is really only possible if you shut the whole thing down, which we've seen repeatedly now in the Middle East. But it also means that we live in a time which for every Osama bin Laden death, we get an Osama in hell. Right? It means that for every quasi-presidential candidate, we get a fake Sarah Palin who props to whoever's writing this. It launched the day she entered political consciousness back in 2008 and has continued ever since. And for every public event that captures some media attention, whether it's the rapture or a snake escape, there's a Bronx Zoo cobra. And of course, for every politician, large or small, there's a Mayor Emanuel waiting in the wings. These accounts exist alongside the real people, real events, and within our real lives. Hanging there in our world, a real-time mashup of fiction with nonfiction, fantasy with reality. These blurring lines of truth and fiction, parody and reality, sets up a world that's both exhilarating and scary, which brings us back to these guys. My first reaction when these guys showed up, and I hope it would be any of yours if you ever find yourself in the same situation, was to dive off my couch, crawl across the floor, and hide in my bedroom, hoping that they would go away. But they didn't, and finally I reluctantly opened the door, and I said, "Did you really have to come to my house?" Right? And they said something that I didn't really want to hear, which was, "Well, we went to your work first, but you weren't there." And then they said something even less reassuring. "There are two ways that we can do this." And I, of course, finished his sentence and said, "The easy way or the hard way?" And he explained I could close the door, that they would talk to my neighbors and my coworkers. They'd go talk to my parents in Glenview, which was not information at their location that I had offered up in advance. And in fact, they were on vacation and they came back to multiple messages on their answering machine. They still use an answering machine from news people trying to find me. Or my other option was that I could invite them in, them and then the other news folks that followed, do one-on-one interviews, and they would all be on their way, tapes in hand. At the time, it seemed that the hard way was closing that door. Right? That disrupting the lives of my neighbors and coworkers wasn't a choice I was willing to make. But now I actually realize that the hard way was opening the door. Because opening the door meant opening up my life to extreme levels of unpredictability. It meant opportunities, absolutely. There is a book, of course. September 13th, Scribner. It's awesome. But it also meant staring into the unknown, right? And taking a step into a void. The easy way or the hard way is kind of a question that all of us find ourselves pondering right now with media and information as it moves into an era of real-time, decentralized, participatory communication. The easy way is really doing what we've always done, right? Walking the same path that we've always walked and hoping that something will magically put everything back in its place. But as our communications grow more and more complex, the speed that they travel is faster and faster, the voices within more voluminous, the implications of the chorus harder and harder to control. It's pretty clear that the easy way isn't even an option. And so we move into a shared reality, right? A shared reality of the hard way. And we stare into the unknown, and we take a step into that void together. Thanks so much.